And start recording. And then we'll do screen share.
I don't think, I saw a meme yesterday about misspelling desert and dessert. And of course, you're like, oh, that's not a problem for me. Yeah. I think dessert says two S's.
It does. And you know how because I'm severely dyslexic. I don't know if y'all realize that or not, but if there's something spelled wrong, after this many years, I'm probably not going to catch it. And I used to tell my high school students, me talking and writing at the same time, it doesn't always end well. It's pretty comical. But having dyslexia, it's one of those things that it does make me very creative, but I can't see my own spelling mistakes, but I can edit for other people. But desert and dessert, which one would you rather have two of? A dessert. My high school English teacher taught that to me, so I've never misspelled it, but I have to have like little tools.
I remember that it's two S's, strawberry shortcake is a dessert.
There you go. There you go.
Condiments, desserts, baked goods, sides.
Do y'all want to bring drink? Like, do we want to do like just a cooler of water and sodas, or I wish. Yeah, that would work. And there's a Berkshire's right here, so I can bring, I'll have coolers because we'll have to put, when we get the pork and the beef out of the smoker, we'll put it in one cooler wrapped up so it can rest. And then I can bring the other cooler, and I know we have ice here. We have an ice machine in the lab, and I think they'll let us fill the cooler with that. So, yeah, sounds good. What? Yeah. Yeah, I hate bugs. I hate pests. Dun, dun, dun. We're gonna kill them all. No, we want to look at it. Beneficial, we want to look at how to ID them. And I am by no means an entomologist.
Taste test.
Yeah, the July 4th, we won't be here. So if you guys actually go all the way through the course in Canvas, I think it's unit 8, unit 7, unit 8 is that like farm to table marketing.
Yeah.
What we're going to be doing Tuesday, besides just kind of enjoying the spoils of farm to table, we want to, just visit about your ideas and generating an income, because that's one of the big things that farmers face is how do we start earning money doing what we're doing? I know that the way we have our meat products priced, we're very affordable. But I also know that I would not be able, it's not sustainable for me to make that my primary income. One, I would have to probably quadruple the number of cattle that I would have to do at least 20 head of cattle a year. And I would have to probably charge another anywhere 75 cents to $1 a pound for processed beef. And if just nice round numbers, if a steer dresses out at 500 pounds, usually they're about 800 when we have them done. But if they dress out at 500 pounds and I add $1 per pound, that's another $500 that I net profit off of each steer. If I do that with 20 head, that's an extra $10,000 a year. If I do it with 100 head, then, I mean, it's obviously, it's a scale model. But yeah, that's one of the things that we really want to look at to try to help y'all get to that point where, one, it gives you credibility to go to the bank and take out a loan. But two, it makes your CPA happy if you are not just losing money on your operation. That's one of the things that a lot of hobby farms do is they use it as a tax write-off. You have to show that you're generating an income. You have to show that. My neighbor behind me is a widow, and of course she's 81, and she's from Germany. She was a hairdresser from Germany. She escaped Germany during the very tail end of World War II. And just she's fascinating because she literally goes, she was a interior designer and has done a lot of fashion type. So she'll be in, Coco Chanel shoes walking around the pasture. And I'm like, Sigrid, you've lost your mind. But she also, since her husband has passed away, she also has taken on more and more of understanding the business side of things. And he only passed away like 10 years ago. So in her early 70s, she learned how to sit down with her accountant and figure out, can I afford this? And how am I going to generate an income from this 40 acres that we have? She's getting better. She just loves her cows. She calls them her babies, and she doesn't like to sell them. And I told her, I said, you're either going to need to sell them or you're going to have to buy 10 times the amount of hay this year, because they now have 18 head on 40 acres, which is too many. She needs to cut her herd in half. And so, she has to warm up to the idea to sell her cows. And right now, cattle prices at the sale barn are the highest I have ever seen. And that's, since I graduated from A&M. I've never seen steers selling at the sale barn for $4.20 a pound or $5 a pound. You're buying a 300-pound calf that really is too young to be weaned, and you're paying $1,500 for that calf. I really have to, one, question why you're spending that much on a calf, but the market is strong for cattle right now. So if you can get enough on the ground and get them sold, she could actually turn a profit this year if she would just agree to, let's catch the cows, we'll take the babies to the sale, we'll run them through the sale, you will get a nice big check for them. She has a hard time letting her babies go. So can I leash your bull at least? Because he's super gentle. He's kind of quiet. He's mostly beef master, throwing excellent babies. Just let me lease him for 90 days. I'll, pay to feed him, and then I'll take him to the sale for you. And if it looks like prices are going to start dropping, we'll take him sooner. She doesn't know how all that works. I mean, it's confusing to her. So I've got to sit down and actually just show her on paper what it means. But, yeah. So her big thing is that her pastures look really good right now. But if we don't get rain in the next month, we're going to be back where we were last year. And she went through probably 55 bales of hay last year with that number of head of cattle, but she does graze 40 acres. My cows are on 12 acres, and I fed, I don't know, 25 bales because I cut my herd down. I had 16 head, and when the drought started 2 years ago, I was like, okay, something's got to give here. I just really need to. And this is where I am at a crossroads. Do I just get rid of my breeding cattle, and do I only buy bull calves, make them steers, and just do the feeder market? Because that's where most of my income comes from anyway with the livestock. So, but I got to get my soil healthy first. Nice segue there, huh? Hi, Stevie. How are you?
Good.
Good. Hi, Charlie. Can you guys see the screen?
Hello, yes.
Okay. So okay.
Whatever.
What's your signature dessert that you like to make? And if you don't cook, what is the best thing you've ever bought at Brookshire's or HEB? Yeah. We don't care if it's store-bought or homemade, but if you want to make a dessert and surprise us, just sign up for a dessert. I'm pretty sure everybody here just likes food. They're in this class for a reason. So Charlie and Stevie, I don't know if y'all heard that, but we've got a sign up sheet going around for next Tuesday. Jeff had a brilliant idea. So our family is going to do the meat, we'll smoke it, and we'll do the smoked vegetables for the salsa. And I'm going to do 2 different versions of potato salad. If you don't like potato salad and you want to bring something else like a macaroni salad or something like that, or mac and cheese, that's up to y'all. I'm only doing it's a store-bought potatoes based potato salad. And then I'm going to use the homegrown potatoes that we have at the farm that we've been curing. We're going to use those, and then you guys are going to taste test. So I won't put like a lot of onion in it because not everybody likes onion in their potato salad. I don't like onion in my potato salad, or I may just put it on the side. And if you want to add it, you can. But I'll try to keep everything else the same, with the exception of, for the store-bought potatoes, I'll use store-bought eggs. And for ours, I'll use our farm fresh eggs. So that's the only difference. If you guys just want to shoot me an email, or if you want to, just shoot me an email. Let me know what you want to bring.
We can do this on Thursday too.
Okay.
Who aren't here.
That's funny. I just got a text. We were just talking about cattle, and I think I told you guys I bought a 50% Wagyu steer, 50% Wagyu, 50% Brangus. And just out of the blue, this guy texted me that I bought this steer from, and he said, "Have you processed the Wagyu yet?" No, so one of the things that I have found, I have just surreptitiously met a guy that he raises Wagyu. He has a Longhorn that he rides. I think I told you guys about this last week or 2 weeks ago, but he raises Wagyu cattle, and he had several of his customers ask him for grass-fed Wagyu. He said that was the biggest mistake they ever made, because Wagyu, their genetics do not, like when you process them and you show that steak, you won't get the marbling. And he said it's the worst beef he's ever had. I can't even give the ground beef away. It's so bad.
Wagyu.
Yeah, don't do grass-fed Wagyu. Nope. So it's too lean, and the flavor profile is not what you expect from Wagyu. It's like eating I don't know, 10-year-old dairy cow, he said. Those were his words, not mine. So the Wagyu steer we've had, he's 50% Brangus. So we know we've got a lot of that Angus in there too, but I bought him in February or March. I went and picked him up, and I mean, he's not even a year old yet. So he's probably 800 pounds right now.
You got a picture?
Not a current one.
It's a guy in Chaparral, Texas that does Wagyu, and that's all he does. He has 100% Wagyu, and he said he can't keep it.
No, we've been looking for a bull to either lease or purchase a younger bull and raise him up, because I want him to be halter broke, because they can be a little skittish and a little temperamental like other breeds of cattle. But I want to be very selective on the bull that we get. My son and I will partner on him, but if I'm not going to keep my breeding cows, I'm not going to spend $5,000 for a bull calf that's like, 2 months old, 3 months old. Importing Wagyu from Japan can be very expensive. Like $25,000 a head or more. So yeah. I'll get a picture and I'll show it to you next week, Charlie. He's looking really good right now. I just haven't taken a recent picture of him since he's been in the pen. He's literally on all he can eat hay and sweet feed, which is really the ideal diet for them. When I put him out on grass, I'm going to have to up their feed and get them trained to come to the feed bunk a little bit more, because I'll be competing with all the green grass that, again, they just don't put the marbling on. But really, truly, you're not supposed to process them until they're right at 30 months of age, which that's the USDA limit for processing cattle and leaving them bone in. So he's got to get to close to 30 months of age, which will be fall of 2025, like December of 2025. He'll be 30 months.
Oh, okay.
So, all right. So let's talk about our objectives. We want to talk about best practices, and best practices is going to be a little wide open depending on what method of production you choose. Some of the resources, and then the science behind soil management, integrated pest management, and then starting to put those pieces together. So I know we've talked about propagation. We've actually done a lot of transplanting out here. We talked about watering and irrigation and played with the irrigation out there without actually putting one together. When I go to Wiley tomorrow, one of my objectives is to see if we still have an irrigation system there that has not been assembled that I can bring for not next week, but the week after. When we get into unit 6, we talk about irrigation. And I'm going to basically lay it out and have you guys practice assembling one so you can get a feel for it. I will tell you my personal preference for watering, depending on the crop I have. If I'm raising a lot of corn in my garden, I typically will use a T-post mounted sprinkler, and I'll run it. For crops that are closer to the ground, we have finally kind of dialed it in to using soaker hoses and using the landscape fabric. And using the soaker hoses really ideally should be under the landscape fabric, but right now they're laying on top. We're just testing to see how long they need to run to get a good saturating watering in once a week. So those are some of the things that you'll look at. Again, best practices depends on what method you adopt. So soils management. Again, we've talked about this before, and you guys have gone through handling the soils, getting a feel for what the test kits are like. One of the advantages of knowing your area is know your average rainfall also. There are some parts of Texas, like the coast, that just get hammered with rain. Charlie, I know your construction plan, you had done your plan more towards Houston. Good idea to know what the rainfall is and whether you're even going to have irrigation needs. If you're going to go out to the panhandle, you're going to have to irrigate everything. The USDA, this is the map that I pulled, and this is the link. If you guys, I just put it in the PowerPoint so you guys could download it. What I will say is, before the class is over, if you want any of these links, you want to bookmark them, go to the unit in Canvas, open the website, bookmark it on your computer, and then that way you won't have to try to find it, because when the class is over, you'll lose access to the Canvas page. You'll notice that the gray area here is that Houston black clay. It's really kind of a blob, but there are fingers of the Crockett loam that comes through here. You can also go to the internet and type in soil map for whatever county you're in, and you will get a much more detailed version of that. And when we get done with this, I can show you what we found for Hunt County, because it was kind of cool. So soil survey, soil testing, we talked about that also. Pull multiple samples from your property. Texas A&M AgriLife, your county extension agent, if you don't have a soil testing probe, most offices have one they'll let you borrow. Please clean it before you take it back to them. They get really upset if you pull soil samples and it's really muddy and then turn it back and it's got like concrete clay in there. Sending your soil samples off to the testing lab in College Station. It's the cheapest way to get the best results you're going to get. But remember, everything depends on how well you pulled those samples. So they can only test what you send them. And then one of the things that we talk about a lot is, how do we improve the soils that we have? How do we make it better? We already know compost is it's like liquid gold. I mean, or powdered gold, I guess. But if you can get your hands on a very large quantity of the native Texas hardwood mulches, if you can stockpile those and just let them start composting, in about 5 years, when a lot of storm damage comes through, all the tree companies are out there. If you have property And sometimes if you can find the foreman of that crew and say, hey, do y'all need to dump truckloads? I can use it right here and you don't have to get far off the driveway. And sometimes those foremen are very appreciative, especially if they're working in your area and they have not found a place to dump yet. It saves them time and money if they're local and they can dump on your property. And if you don't mind having a pile of mulch, or you've got a tractor where you can move it where you want to store it, I mean, it's just it's a great free product if you can get a hold of it. I think we ended up with 8 or 10 loads. I want to say, no, it was during COVID. So it was probably the summer or spring of 2019. We ended up with 8 or 10 loads. And I just left it alone and let it compost. And it halved in size in that year because of the composting. And then whatever was on top, because I didn't take the tractor out and turn it. If you wanted to compost faster and you've got a tractor with a bucket, you can turn that compost and you can get it really to develop a lot faster. But we used it in areas where, because our soil doesn't have a bottom to it. We've talked about, the fact that bedrock here on this clay and on some of the sandy loam, there is no bedrock. I mean, it's so deep, we haven't found it. And if it is, it's kind of a soft limestone, chalky, caliche type material. So adding that composted organic matter to high traffic areas like where the horses are, that has all been pushed down into the soil, and it's now, it gives my soil structure. So even when it rains, I don't go down to my knees. I might go just a couple of inches down. And you can't even tell that it's there when you walk on it now, but I know how many dump truck loads I put right there by that gate. And I don't have that issue of livestock getting hurt or me slipping and going down in the mud. The other option was use recycled concrete, which we did for the cattle, but for horses, that's not ideal. You can work on building up your soils by doing controlled burn. You can also use a controlled burn to help with invasive species of weeds. We had in Collin County, we had Chase Brook, who has now moved to the state. He's now a program specialist. But Chase was our county extension agent, and literally his specialty was controlled burns and managing forages and invasive species of, like the eastern red cedar trees. They need to all be taken out. When we used to have fire running through here almost every year, those eastern red cedars wouldn't grow. When we had large herds of native ruminants, whether it was bison or large herds of deer, elk that would come down very North Texas, they would consume those very young cedar trees and they would never take over property. Now that we fence things off and we don't mow it, and we don't run cattle on it all the time, the eastern red cedars have just taken over. But they're native to Texas, not North Texas, and they're certainly not native to the Blackland Prairie. So, and they're everywhere up here. I have them on my property. I've been removing some of them, but I have a bunch. So, you can use livestock to help build your soil. Obviously, if you have an issue with Johnson grass is an introduced species. If you have an issue with that, you can graze it to the point where it won't come back. But it takes pretty intensive grazing, and they will also selectively graze some of the more beneficial grasses. So, and then obviously manure from those livestock help build the microbe content of the soil. So if you use intense rotational grazing, you can build that up. Cover crops is it's kind of like a cheat, like a gaming cheat. If you can use cover crops year after year after year that do not wipe out your native grasses, then when you go in and terminate that cover crop, you mow it. All you do is mow it, knock it down. You've now added to that organic matter that then becomes topsoil. Hey, Charlie, what's up?
Hey, on where it said avoid bare soil for weeks, exposed to the sun. I mean, why would you want to do that? I mean, wouldn't the sun kind of add nutrients to the soil, or would it not? Or would it kind of burn out whatever's there?
No, the sun basically, one of the issues with leaving bare soil, and we're going to talk about tilling methods, if it is it's a fairly dense clay soil, and it's compacted, the only way to break it up is to till it. But you don't want to leave that bare soil for an extended period of time because the UV radiation will kill the beneficial microbes in the soil. Part of the beneficial microbes comes from the compost. When you have a fire that goes through and burns the organic matter, the ash will lay down on the soil and it can change the pH. But given within just a few months, that will break down, especially if it rains, and that will add nutrients back to the soil also. Yes.
After the season is over, take that up or just?
Two schools of thought. Most commercial crop production, well, they use their landscape fabric once and then they recycle it. They'll take it to a recycle because it's mostly plastics. It cuts down on pests, and included in pests is not just insects, but it's weeds. What we have found, even organic farming, if you're not going to use an herbicide, really you're going to lose the battle unless you're using landscape fabric. You can use other mulching methods once plants come up, but it's much more labor intensive. And when you're running a 10-acre crop farm, you simply don't have the manpower to do it. Landscape fabric is one of your lower cost alternatives, but it also shades the soil underneath and the sun isn't breaking it down.
I have a raised in-ground bed. That was pretty like me. I use it there. I have a,
do you leave it from year to year or do you take it up?
well, I left it there last year and I was like, I don't know if I should have, but even leaving it here, I saw so they were lacking light. So I was like, if I take it up, there would be weeds.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, like the watermelon last year, it was really, really hot.
Yeah.
And with it sitting on there, I wonder if that's good for it. I probably have to put air control or something. Right?
So that's one of the questions I've asked quite a bit. Is most landscaping fabric is darker in color, so it does heat up. And what does that do to the plants above it? And it does radiate that heat in the spring. It can help warm up the soil a little bit sooner than just leaving it untouched. I know there are some landscape fabrics that are a lighter gray that you can get. I don't know what they're made of, but I also know there's some out there that are more natural fibers. They will break down, but it takes them a few years. And because they're natural fibers and they break down, the weeds tend to come up through them pretty easily. So, I mean, experiment with different kinds and see what works best. My all-time favorite mulch to use is wheat straw, especially if they have harvested the wheat off of it. But even if they haven't, we had a really rough year, really rough drought the last 2 years. And I got a couple of bales of wheat straw because we do the blooming harvest here in October. And they like to have the straw as decoration. And there are some wheat farmers in this area that will do the square bales, and they mostly sell to like retail nurseries and they use them for decoration. But it's cheap. It's like $6 a bale, and one bale will cover. I mean, I did 2 bales behind the greenhouse out here and broke it up. And it, for all intents and purposes, it stopped the erosion back there. We overplanted with seeds. And then we laid that mulch down. We didn't put it very thick on purpose because we wanted the wildflowers and the cover crop to get sun and water. But once your plants are coming up, I know northern states that have an abundance of wheat straw available at their farm and garden center. They'll do the landscape fabric, they'll plant, the seedlings will come up, and then they'll cover it with wheat straw. Yeah, especially in Texas. And wheat straw is a very light color, so it'll repel some of that heat. It also helps retain, once you get that watered, you use a fraction of the amount of water because you've got now a 6-inch layer of like a insulating cushion. Mulch will do the same thing, but mulch can be more compact. Mulch is my preferred, like walking paths in our gardens, is to mulch it heavily. And typically with ours, it's a pretty good area. I try to at least do like a T or a plus sign of mulch so that even if we've gotten a lot of rain, I can still get through the garden and get to where I need to go, and then kind of step off into the plants if I need to. But I mean, all of that's biodegradable and it just adds to your compost. It does take time to put the mulch down. The more you layer it, the longer it's going to take. But everything underneath, even under your walkways, you're going to have earthworms living under there, and then they're going to move in and out of your garden area if you have no barriers. Raised beds is, typically if they're just setting on the ground, the earthworms I've never had a problem with them getting into the raised beds. Even with landscape fabric, we've had worms get into the raised beds, and that's a really good sign of healthy soil. So
when we first done that garden, we didn't put any fabric on. We didn't put any weed barrier under it.
Yeah.
So we were fighting weeds.
Yep.
So we dug, just a section at a time. We did like 4 by 20 at a time. We dug it all out, put the weed barrier under there.
Yep.
Put that back, and it was really good.
Yep.
And then we put the woven fabric on top of that. And then we put the drip tape.
Yep.
Last year was like breeze. It was just a breeze.
Yep.
Watering everything.
Yeah. So the AgriLife, there's a group of researchers at AgriLife that came up with something called EarthKind. And the EarthKind method, which is what we have in most of the in-ground beds at Wiley, is that you take a native soil, doesn't matter how good or how poor that soil is, you come in and you add, it's like a lasagna method, you add about 8 inches of compost. I like to incorporate some of the native soil in the bottom layers of that compost just because I think the nutrients are there and the roots of the plants are not having to work so hard to get down to that native soil, because our native soil does have nutrition. It's just, like concrete in the summertime. But what we did is we went in and we tilled. And as hard as that clay was, because where our gardens are at Wiley, that was the old construction site where they staged all the equipment for the construction of the campus. And then they just scraped it all off. So there was no topsoil there at all. And we tilled it. We got about 3 or 4 inches down and we added, I don't know, probably 12 yards of compost to each bed, got it tilled in. And then I just came back and I just dumped compost down and we raked it out. It was about 8 inches deep. First heavy rain, it settled to about 4 inches, which is what our goal was. And then on top of that, we started with about 6 to 12 inches of mulch. And again, after that first rain, it all settled right down to about 4 inches of mulch. And what we've noticed is so those beds have been in place for 1.5 years, and we have a major issue with weeds this year because of all the rain that we had, but also because my 2 student workers, it took them so long to get them hired, so we weren't able to stay on top of it. The pollinator bed at Wiley, we did a little bit differently. We used the cardboard. I took a bunch of the boxes from the hogs and the cattle that we had processed, and it doesn't have like that plastic filament in the box. So we pulled all the tape off, we cut them open, we laid them down, and then we did compost and mulch and no native soil. And the weeds in the pollinator bed have been much easier to control. So landscape fabric, cardboard, if you can do some sort of underlayment to block those weed seeds, it makes a big difference. I noticed there are a lot of commercial greenhouses in this area that will have like a concrete sidewalk down the middle of the greenhouse, but then it has landscape fabric with like a gravel on top.
So I bought gravel, put that down at the bottom of my greenhouse. But then I read something that said it would maybe retain water and it could have like algae.
Well, yeah, it's gonna. Yeah, I bet. I mean, every greenhouse I've ever had that's been covered in algae. Every greenhouse I've ever been in has a coating of algae in there. It's a high water environment. It's just, I mean, if that bothers you, you can put like bleach in a sprayer and just a light bleach solution and go in and just spray it if you don't want the algae. But if the gravel is, jagged enough, you shouldn't slip on it. It shouldn't be a slipping hazard. It's when you get the cooling system and you have the algae and it's on concrete that it becomes a hazard.
It's okay for the plants. That's the
Oh
only
yeah,
thing.
yeah. Yeah. Algae's not going to be a worry. It's the pests that are going to get in there, and yeah. Avoid bare soil for weeks on end. Charlie, this is what you were asking about with the sun. As soon as I expose that soil to UV light, some of the like microorganisms, the beneficial bacteria, is basically going to be fried by UV. It will, like if you have a viral or bacterial disease on a plot of land, knowing what UV light will do to it is to your advantage to expose that soil. And you may have to come through and till it several times and just let the sun do the work for you. You don't have to use a chemical in there to kill it, but also know that you're harming the beneficial. And you may have to go back and look, worm castings with mycorrhiza added to it. It's not a terribly cheap way to do it, but you don't need a lot, and you can then add those beneficial bacteria back in there. If you can increase your diversity at the microbe level, the beneficial microbes, your soil, the healthier your soil is, the healthier your plants are, the fewer issues you're going to have with other pests. Remember though that weeds, definition of a weed is a plant that grows just where you don't want it. So those plants that you may not want in your garden bed, healthy soil, those weeds are going to like that too. So just be aware that you're going to be fighting that battle. The better and deeper your organic matter in your soil is, and the deeper your mulch or protective coating, the more water you're going to retain and the less you're going to have to spend on watering, if that makes sense. So again, the business side of me says, hey, the less water, less money I have to spend on water, the better we're doing. It's better for, this area of Texas where I can conserve water. But the other part of it is that I'm not leaching all of those nutrients, or I'm not using a water that might have a slightly higher salt content. Anything like northwestern Hunt County, the water source there is from groundwater, and it has a super high salt content. So you don't really want to use that on your garden for a long period of time, because you're going to build up salts in the soil. And we know when that happens, we know that then that can create like a desert type treatment of the soil. So rainwater is going to be your best bet. Have your water tested. If you're on municipal water, most of the water in this area is kind of a hard water. So it doesn't have a lot of salt in it. If you use a water softener, a whole house water softener, and you're running that out to your plants, there is some residual salts in there. So be careful about that. It's great for your washing shampoo and clothes and, making your hair feel soft, but it might not be great on your plants.
What's best for like putting around a tree? Compost or mulch?
So really, truly, neither. Because one of the issues with trees, and we see this, I get this question all the time. I don't mulch my trees at all. Nope. They are all Texas native hardwoods. And then of course I have a bunch of crepe myrtles because I love them. And they're not native to the US, but they're still pretty. I don't mulch any of them. The reason being is if you come up too high over that root flare, you're going to kill your tree. You're supposed to see part of that like angle out. You're supposed to see that on every tree. If you start piling up compost and mulch, now you're giving you're creating a hospitable environment for pests and disease. And that root, the base of that tree can't do what it's supposed to do. So we see a lot of that with new builders. These new subdivisions, they come in and they mulch it, or they plant the tree too deep, and then a year later the tree is dead. Most of when I plant any trees that come out of a nursery situation, and it's a 4, 5, 6-year-old tree, even fruit trees, wherever that tree sat in that nursery pot, when I take it out, I'll pull that soil away. If the flare is like 3 inches below, I will immediately open that up and I'll bring that tree up. I know they tell you to plant it the same depth as a nursery pot. I've gotten some trees that have not survived that way, especially peach trees. They still need that flare. So using lower cost organic amendments, if you can find, again, chip drop is one that I know people have used. No, I signed up for it and I just have not had any luck with it. Okay, Stevie said she's coughing, so she's Stevie, I've got your chat up so they can see. Yep. It, again, definition of a weed, if I have daylilies that I consider weeds that I don't want growing with my tomatoes and the soil has a really good nutrient content, they're wildflowers. We used to call them weeds, and people who don't want wildflowers in their flower bed are still going to call them a weed. The flare. Okay, I'm going to turn on my camera so you can see my hands because I was gesturing for them earlier. I don't know. Can you see me on the chat side?
Yes.
Okay. So when you're coming down the trunk of the tree, you'll just start to see where the almost like shoulder or roots start to flare out just a little bit. That you don't want to bury that under a bunch of mulch. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Scoot that over here so I can see if they have questions. So again, anything you can do to, add organic matter, not increase compaction of your soils. One thing to keep in mind is how many times does that tractor or that equipment have to pass over that area? Because every time you do, especially if those tires are in the same spot every time, you get really severe compaction. If you drive by any farm where they drive equipment out to cattle and they always take the same path, or cows walk the same path, that cow path, right? That's compacted soil. Things don't grow there. If you pull those cattle off, pull that tractor out, at some point, grasses will eventually take over that spot. You put cows back out there, they're going to go right back to the same spot. That is a natural walking path for them. Don't tell me how they figure that out, because our cows never met the cows that were on the property before them, and they still use the same walking path, which had grown over. It's just one of those really unique things about having livestock is like, how do they know to do that? All right, so tilling versus no-till. This is a hotly debated topic with organic farmers and even sustainable agriculture. I'm in the camp of, it depends on what your soil is doing, whether you need to till or not. If your soil, or if you buy property that is already in agricultural use and it's been well managed, you may be able to go in and use more no-till methods. For large farms that do a single crop, monocrop, we could still do sustainable agriculture with a monocrop. It's not ideal, but if you've got 10,000 acres and you're growing wheat or soybean or corn, there are dairies and there are farms that they use no-till practices. They invest heavily in what's called a no-till drill. And what it literally is it's a seeding machine they pull behind their tractor, and it has 2 little blades. They come through, it cuts the soil, it drops the seed, and then it has like this little flap in the back and it buries the seed. So we're still cutting the soil, but we're not disrupting the entire microbiome. No-till agriculture relies more heavily on a couple of practices. You can't not control the weeds or your cover crop. And in most cases, they're controlling it with Roundup. They're actually coming in and they're broadcast spraying to terminate that cover crop. They'll terminate it, then they'll come in. They don't disrupt the soil. And if that cover crop is tall enough, kill it with an herbicide, then it lays down, that becomes organic matter. If there is residual of that herbicide, is that a practice you want to do? So you have to weigh the pros and the cons. You can do no-till by using like plastic tarp or use the silage tarps. A lot of people do those. We're not talking 1,000 acres. You can't silage tarp 1,000 acres and do no-till drill. For small farming, for very small footprint farming, it works beautifully. Yep, cardboard works too. You can do cardboard with mulch on top of it. My entire front flower bed, I didn't have time to till it. Once upon a time, I rescued 3 potbelly pigs that are still at my house. I now have 4 of them. They've become the home for unwanted potbellies. They are highly destructive, just like feral hogs. And when they were young, they were bottle babies. We got them in January. They couldn't live outside. They can't regulate their body temperature. So they lived in the house, and they're the easiest animal on the planet to housebreak. You can potty train them in about 30 seconds. I think it's mostly intuitive. And contrary to popular belief, pigs are very, very particular about where they go to the bathroom, and they do not want to go to the bathroom where they sleep. So they grew up kind of like teenage kids. They graduated to my front yard because I really couldn't think of another place to put them, but they were still coming in the house at night, or when the weather was bad, they would sleep in the kitchen with all my dogs. I had baby gates everywhere because of the pigs. Fast forward 3 years later, they needed to go outside. They needed to go to the barn. So they now have a much bigger area at the barn. They have a 12 by 12 horse stall. They can come in and out. They've got I call it a pasture area. It is completely denuded of vegetation. There is nothing there. It's like a beach. It's all sand. They do not let anything grow. They will root it up. They take it out. In that particular case, if those pigs ever get relocated somewhere else, or they get to the end of their lifespan and cross the no, these we won't eat. It's not worth it. There's too much fat on them. But I'm super attached to them, and I gave assurances that they would not get eaten. But when they cross that Rainbow Bridge, it's like concrete in their pasture. So they're it's about 1/8 of an acre they have. Really tough on the soil. So it's like they constantly till it. Pigs root, they're constantly tilling the soil. The only bacteria in that soil is probably from them going to the bathroom. So for me to ever capture that back and fix the damage they've done, I'll have to come back in and I'll have to hit it hard with compost. So they tore up my front flower beds. They ate all of my, basically heirloom type roses and all of that. I laid cardboard down, planted what I needed to plant, and I mulched over it, and it's held up for a year. So cardboard, if you can get it in large quantities and it doesn't have a plastic filament in it, it's a great way to mulch, especially if you can get it for free. When not to till. So if you have super compacted soils, you're going to have to till or you're going to have to plow. We talk about tilling. It doesn't always mean using a tiller. It means you can either use a disc, you can use a cultivator, you can hand till. You've got to break up that soil and you've got to amend it with organic matter. And it really does make it a much faster job to put a tiller on your PTO. I don't even take mine off my tractor. It just lives on the tractor. I don't put my shredder on my tractor. I hire my neighbor to mow for me and my tiller stays on it because I use it. I probably have 200 hours on this tiller and I've had it for 2 years. I think I have 20 hours on my shredder and I've had it for 9 years. So I don't need to shred as often. I'm getting ready to sell it, I think. What it does is that it allows roots to penetrate the soil, whereas before they would not be able to. You can, little secret weapon, you can use, and we've used them here. Are you talking about pigs, Charlie, marking their territory? They do, especially males. Females are not as bad. Aeration can help. Tilling, you can use an aerator if you have one. I don't have one, so for me, tilling would work better, Stevie. Same concept, we're just loosening the soil. Turnips, daikon radish, anything that has a large root. One, you plant it, it breaks up those compacted soils. And two, you let it rot in the soil, it's now free organic matter. So it has dual purpose. Even if it just breaks up the soil and you harvest some of those, I mean, we pulled some of the turnips out, just barely touch the surface of how many are out there. The daikon radish will do the same thing. There is a, what is it called? It's like a driller radish. They use it in Canada a lot for their no-till operations. They'll overseed with that. They plant it in the fall. They let it get a good start, and then over the winter, they get a hard freeze. It kills the plant, but it decomposes underground. So now you have organic matter introduced lower down. And that's the whole idea. The thicker you can get that topsoil and humus layer, the more nutrients you're going to have at the surface. So when not to till, the soil is already well mixed, not compacted, and you have an adequate amount of organic humate in the surface. Weed load is minimal or manageable. That means, have you mulched it? Are you using a landscape fabric? Everything here, any exposed soil, good quality soil. I mean, as soon as we got all the rain that we had this spring, everything grew. And I don't care what kind of grass it was growing. I have volunteer pumpkins in my front yard from the pigs, and they're producing pumpkins already. My neighbors laugh at me because I won't mow them. If I do mow them and the lawnmower hits them, first of all, if you ever hit a lawnmower with a pumpkin that's like 4 or 6 inches, it turns into a projectile. I just think it's funny when I hit them and it like shoots out towards the road, and I'm hoping a car isn't coming. An existing cover crop that you can terminate, you can either terminate. Typically, grazing is not going to be a USDA approved method, but you can still have your cattle terminate a cover crop. You can mow it, or if it's a cool weather crop, as soon as it gets hot, ryegrass is a great one. It gets warm, the ryegrass lays down. I would suggest when it gets that dry and lays down that you go in and shred it, because you want to chop that up, it'll decompose faster. Or if it's too wet or too dry. Would what?
Sweet potato. Well, and then it has the runners, which would start the new sweet potato plants. So you use it as a cover and a ground plant.
I don't see why it wouldn't. I mean,
Since our summers are so long.
Yeah. So I've never in my life grown a sweet potato. I don't know. I don't know. I've just never tried to grow one.
They're easy to use.
I hear people say that. Yeah. I would love to try. So, clover is a really good cover crop. And if you don't mind having to come in and mow it a couple of times, every time clover, I mean, some of the crimson clover that we had in the stream tray over here, that was the exact same seed. I buy it in the 50-pound bag at the co-op, and then I add an inoculant and I toss it out on all of our property. Cattle can eat clover in moderation, but some of the clover that we had was 3 feet tall. And with all the rain that we had, the clover did really well, and it choked out some of the weeds. And I wasn't ready to grow anything else there, so I just let it do its job. fast forward to it finally quits raining. About a month ago, I was able to get in and start cutting the clover. When I cut it, because the stalks were so long, it has laid down and it has still choked out some of the weeds. And you can look at the two pastures where we intentionally mowed, we planted more clover in two sections. And you can see in the other section where I didn't put any, because, you know, the assumption is, and we've had this happen in previous years, is that it's a slope. We planted heavily up here, we get heavy rain, it all moves this way. The heavy rain didn't come until all that had germinated. So in the pasture where we didn't put any, the weed load is huge. And I can't even tell you what weeds are over there, because and some are like 8 feet tall, and I've already mowed it twice. So yeah, you can look at both. You can look at those sections and you can see how I've managed them differently. And a lot of it is, it's a matter of time. What do I need to use this for? And when am I going to be able to get to it in between high rain events? And this spring was just tough. It was tough on all of us that were trying to farm. Of course, now we're having to water. So tilling pros and cons. And I will say I am a proponent of tilling if you need to, mainly because of time management. It will break up compacted soils. It'll add amendments if you want. Even if you are, I mean, anytime you go in and till a new area that has green vegetation on it, you're tilling that, it's going back into the soil. It will aerate the soil. The cons are is that you will kill some of the microbiome. If you're not tilling every inch of your property, there, you know, the boundary of that microbiome, we always leave, when we do vegetable crop production, we always leave a grass boundary. Whatever's in that grass boundary has never been tilled. That is a constant microbiome. Those organisms then work their way back in. And it doesn't take long for those earthworms to work, you know, reproduce and work back into the soil. So, it will, and this is always a pro, you know, it's always, you got to weigh your options here. It can bring up really long dormant seeds that you may not even have known were on that property because they were buried. I have learned the fine art of tilling is that you really don't want to go less than about 2 or 3 inches. Anything that's below that can just stay dormant. Most of the root systems of most of the things that we're trying to eradicate, the weeds that we're trying to remove short term, are in that top 3 inches. So I was tilling deeper and I was bringing up some really funky stuff. We've got ground cherries like you wouldn't believe. I have 2 full acres of, if I don't stay on top of it, I will have 2 full acres of ground cherries. We have no idea where they came from. They don't show up anywhere else on any part of the property, just in this 2-acre pasture. Yeah, it's part of the nightshade family and they are edible. The fruit is, the plant is not. Yeah.
How long does it take? Because I guess on my property, that when I want to develop,
Mm-hmm.
nothing's happened there for maybe 8 years.
Mm-hmm. Except cows.
I don't even know if the cow's been back there. I think occasionally a cow will sneak over.
Oh.
You know, I've been back there and I see like a little back way that something's been crawling through there.
Yeah. Is it?
How many seasons would it take to bring it around? Because I was thinking of just end up using it for hay in the beginning.
Does it have a lot of trees on it right now? Or is it just native grasses?
Native grasses, there's a lot of weeds.
Yeah. So, my personal experience is get someone to come in and bale it. And the reason why I say bale it, even with the weeds, is you can sell it to people with goats and they will eat most of what's in that bale. But it also catches some of those plants and the seeds and gets them off that land. Some are going to fall through, especially if you wait much longer. But if you can get someone to bale it, get those bales off of there, even if you have to burn those bales to get rid of the weed seeds. My property in Celeste, when I bought it, it had not been managed well at all. It was 82 acres and the ragweed, I mean, I looked at it in June, so right about this time of year. and walking through, I'm a tall person, and the ragweed and the weeds were above my head. I could tell that the soil was sandy loam. That was the very first thing I looked at. There was a lot of coastal Bermuda that was on the property, but there was also like, it was 82 acres, and I'm gonna say 20 acres were dewberry, wild dewberry, blackberry. And you couldn't walk through that, and cattle couldn't walk through that. So found out after I bought the property, first couple of years, we got the whole thing shredded, could actually see what I had bought before I put the house on the property. And found out kind of through the grapevine that the 16 acres at the back of the property had been the top hay producing meadow in all of Hunt County for years at the hay show at the Hunt County Fair. And I was like, so that tells me someone sprigged this with coastal, really good quality coastal Bermuda. And within 2 years, 3 years, we shredded it. We just kept cutting it back. That coastal came in and choked out most of the weeds. That's when I got my independent applicator's license, and we went in and sprayed with Grazon just to knock it back. And then the following year, it was, I think we had like a 5% weed load on it. It didn't take long. And if I had gotten my applicator license sooner, we could have done it in probably 15 months. The grass was there. We just had to take the competition away. So if you've got good grass down there, even native grasses, if you can get the weed competition gone within 2 or 3 years, you can be baling hay and then selling that hay. That's an income producing part of your property. Yeah.
So we have 11 acres of coastal hay.
Yeah.
And getting someone to come and cut it, no one wants to cut a small acreage. So we bought a rake, we bought a square baler. We had horses at the time.
Yeah.
We just needed a cutter.
Yeah.
And then my husband decided, oh, let's sell everything. Now we're back. We just have the tractor.
Yeah.
So now we got to build back up, because this one guy, he came over to our property. And he goes, hey, I'll cut that for you. You know, the guy, he wanted to cut the hay. And like just give us nothing.
So you kind of get into a catch-22 with some of the balers when they do that. If you want to keep your ag exemption for right now, I would go with you bale it, you take the hay, but you only get it this season.
Can we just cut it?
Yeah, you can just shred it and return it to the soil.
That's what we do right now.
Yeah, sure.
So we just cut it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're baling it yourself, you have that upfront cost of all the equipment. So typically what most contract balers are charging is anywhere from $25 to $30 a bale right now. You know, back in the day, it was like 20 years ago, it was $12 a bale. And I could turn around and sell that low horse quality or high quality cow hay. I could sell it for 45, 50 bucks a round bale. I would pay the baler from that, and then we would keep what we needed for our cows, and we would sell whatever extra we had, which was usually about 100 bales.
Yeah, we did good for the square. People wanted square bales
Yep.
from us.
Yeah, for horses. Yeah, absolutely.
So it was really good hay.
Yeah.
And
Man, a square baler is temperamental though. But if you can get someone to come in and round bale it, and they'll split, or they'll, you have them round bale it, you find out what their commercial charge is, and then you turn around and sell it for twice that. I mean, you can still generate an income, but for the short term, build that relationship. Maybe the first year, say, hey, it hasn't been baled in a few years, it's going to have some weeds in it. This first year, you bale it, you keep it. Next year, we'll pay you to bale it, and then we're going to sell it. They don't have to know you're going to sell it. Just say, hey, we'll pay you to bale it. What's your cost per bale? And there are guys that do that all over. Our neighbor, he's baled my property, and he bales like 3 other neighbors' property. We're not baling ours right now because I've got cows on it. But if I pulled the cows off within a year, we would be producing round bales on it. And we usually get off of 13, 14 acres that we bale. On a good year, we can get, 18 bales, big round bales. Bad year, we might get 11. It's not really worth it for Mark to come do that because he's got over $1 million worth of equipment. He bales hundreds of acres in our area. and mainly just for himself, for his cows, but he's running about 150 head of cattle. So, heavy equipment, again, it's expensive. If you can find someone who can contract out and you're not having to put your time into doing it, it's probably cheaper to hire someone to come in once or twice a year. You know, if you've got 500 acres, it's probably cheaper for you to buy the equipment up front and then depreciate it off your farm taxes. 5 major functions of soil. We need to regulate water, groundwater to aquifers. I mean, we know we've got water stored underground. We've got water that makes it into the lakes. If we can manage water in such a way that it doesn't all, whatever falls on that ground needs to stay on that ground. And a function of the soil, if you have your Bermuda grass right there, the taller it gets, the deeper those roots go. That then becomes a water storage piece of property. Obviously, it sustains plants and animals, filtration of sediment and pollutants, and then cycles nutrients. If you have adequate rainfall and you haven't over fertilized, it keeps those cycles, the carbon sequestering, the nitrogen cycle. Are you guys familiar with the nitrogen cycle at all? How does it get from nitrogen gas in the air to the roots of plants and into plants? Okay. We may have to have like a mini lesson on nitrogen cycle. I won't do it tonight to y'all because I don't want to like
This one, the atmosphere.
lightning is a benefit to converting atmospheric nitrogen.
We did that first.
Do I have to put on my chemistry teacher hat for this one? All right. Yes, I will do that. I guess I'll do it now. Charlie, you guys aren't going to be able to see this until I'm done drawing it, but then I'll turn on the camera so you can. But so the super simple version of this is, the air we breathe is mostly nitrogen gas. Like, I don't know, 68% nitrogen. Then you have oxygen, you have carbon dioxide, you have other gases. So this is just floating around in the air. It's inert, can't do much with it. It's just there. But we need nitrogen into the ground for my flowers here. We have to get that nitrogen in a form that the plants can use. They can't use just straight N2. So a couple of things have to happen. We have to capture it, and then it has to go through a chemical reaction to get it into the right form. Lightning is one of those, where, it smells like rain, smells like a storm, and then we have lightning. What we're getting is, we're getting like an electrical charge that is basically creating NO2 or NO3, nitrites, okay?
Nitrites are extremely poisonous.
Not to plants.
No.
No. Nitrites and nitrates we use them a lot in like food preservation. It's in pickling salt. And then we have, I promise I'm not going to bring out my cartoon skills very often, but you have your cow. So what do cows do after they eat and drink a lot? Poop and pee, okay? So you have ammonia, which is NH4 in the urine, okay? Aquaponics, you want to use fish in your hydroponic operation? Fish will give off major amounts of ammonia, okay? Plants can't use ammonia. it has to go through a biological conversion to become NO2 or NO3. Okay, so in aquaponics, you have to set up a biologic filter. For that ammonia to get converted. Atmospherically, most plants will end up using atmospheric oxygen through some form or another, through some part of that process. Legumes are going to be our alfalfa, our beans, our peas, those things that have root nodules that can actually take N2 and convert it into a usable form of nitrogen. So that's why I always talk about, or clover. Clover is another legume. Using a cover crop that is a legume, it is the most efficient point from N2 to get it to the plant. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Again, I'm giving the like very, very basic version. Question, Rob?
So can get it.
Okay. So some of y'all have mentioned aquaponics, right? Ammonia. That's an ammonium ion, right? You have dogs, they pee in the yard, you notice it's a yellow spot. That's because the ammonia, the urea, that ammonia is burning the grass. It can't use it. If it's more spread out and it has time to go through that biologic conversion into a usable form, plants can use that. We talk about hot manures, certain manures that you should never take directly and put in your garden because it'll burn everything, because it tends to have a higher ammonia content. That will be from like a show barn where you have a bunch of horses in stalls and they urinate on wood chips. The wood chips are dry. There's no like biologic agent that breaks that ammonia down into a usable form. And that's why you can definitely smell that ammonia. Okay. Aquaponics, same concept, but you have to create an artificial biologic filter. If you have a saltwater fish tank, you know that you have to have a very, very well functioning biologic filter to keep that saltwater tank in balance. Freshwater tanks, if you don't clean the gravel, if you have an under gravel filter, you naturally develop that biologic filtration system. But typically freshwater fish are much more prone to mess up their tank, so you do have to clean it, but you don't ever want to do a complete water change because you're getting rid of the beneficial bacteria. Okay. That's what probably should take an entire lecture of the super short version. I'm going to turn the video on so you guys can see the board.
Okay, cool.
So right over by the screen, I can't disconnect or you won't be able to see the screen up here. And I can't really zoom in, but I think if you pull it up to full screen, you should be able to see my very rudimentary nitrogen cycle. So bacteria in the soil, whether you have legumes or not, that microbiome that we keep talking about, that's where some of that conversion to usable nitrogen happens. Okay. Does that make sense, Charlie?
Yes.
Okay. So the other part of this is going to be structure. obviously a high quality soil gives your plants something for the roots to hang on to. I mean, obviously farming plants is so much easier than livestock because you're not having to keep them contained. They don't move. They don't grow legs and run through barbed wire fences and run out in front of cars. But the other benefit of understanding how soil functions and how plants function is that if you are going to truly be a regenerative, sustainable farmer, is that you're going to leave buffer areas where you never touch that vegetation. That is going to dramatically improve the erosion issues. And I want to show you, we found something really cool on Google Earth. Yesterday, we were looking at something completely unrelated. And we have some folks in this area that Stevie, I'll get a closer picture of it here in just a minute, or I'll take a picture with my phone and post it. There are some farmers in this area that really were skeptical when we brought in this urban sustainable agriculture program. And we've now had a chance to visit with them through AgriLife and through the different events we've had. We've partnered with them over 4 years. And what we're noticing is they're starting to adopt some of the practices. They've gone home and they've researched this newfangled agriculture thing that my grandfather was doing 100 years ago. Sustainable agriculture is not new. We are just bringing it back, and we're using what we learned from some of the old folks to improve what we're doing now. So that's just something to keep in mind. That's always a great conversation. Okay, soil pH. We've already talked about the benefits of knowing your soil pH and knowing that there are some plants that will do well in that pH range and others just don't waste your time with them. Test your soil every year for pH. You guys know you can get the kits off of Amazon. I think the kits that we used, I think the pH was probably the most successful test that we did, and that was a relatively inexpensive test kit off of Amazon. Choose your crops carefully. Buffering capacity, right? What that means is that I can never permanently change the pH. We first started with the program, we constantly got questions about blueberries and azaleas and camellias, things that do well in southern Louisiana and other parts of the country don't do well here because our pH is too high. It's too basic. We have too much calcium carbonate in our soil. Blueberries do better in the range of like 6.8 to 7.1. 6.8 is preferable. Doesn't matter how much acid or base I add to the soil. It takes years to see a noticeable change. Okay. Raised beds, you can manage the pH. You can artificially manage it. If you are going to make that all-out commitment to go to raised beds, then you can manage your pH, and especially if you don't add native soil. Most compost is going to test slightly acidic. Okay. If you want it to be more acidic in raised beds, again, you can add coffee grounds, you can add peat moss when you first build those raised beds, and then you're immediately at an advantage with some of those acid-loving plants. I remember my parents are from Louisiana, and they wanted azaleas everywhere, and they could not understand why the azaleas just would not grow in Plano. Because you have really basic soil. And they thought it was because the soil was such a heavy clay that nothing would grow in it. My mom at that time was not a master gardener, master naturalist like she is now. And, that's almost 50 years ago. So she has learned a lot since moving into the Blackland Prairie. But what she has found out is that it's just not worth it. It's not worth your time to grow azaleas. You cannot manage them here and keep them looking like their native areas. If you want to raise the pH, which most of the time we don't have to worry about here, you'll add agricultural lime, dolomitic lime, and you have to add it consistently, and then hopefully within about 2 years you'll see that pH go up. We already have a slightly basic soil here. I'm not sure I would go that route, especially depending on what you want to grow. Some of the native grasses and Bermuda grasses do want a more basic soil, more alkaline soil. So if you're growing hay for, commercial production, then testing your soil, you may have to add lime every year. Lower the pH. I have found that peat moss and compost are my two cheapest, biggest investments I can make in raised beds. But it's not a permanent change unless you have that in like a giant pot, basically. You can take potting mix and you can take those and add it to it. All right. So pests and diseases, basically, we talk about integrated pest management. It's not just bugs, it's also weeds. Some people don't understand that IPM and getting your independent applicators license means that you can now purchase certain sprays, certain chemical compounds for insects and or weed prevention. It's all called pests now. So plant diseases, beneficial fungi are going to be one of your better tools in your toolbox, especially the mycorrhizal fungi. Mushrooms. I think this is awesome. Every time I'm on some of the DFW plant groups because they're like obsessed with the super expensive tropical plants. And I think it's great fun to watch the interaction. It's like, I get my popcorn and I just watch on social media. People freak out when they see mushrooms growing in their plants. And I'm like, oh, you've got healthy soil. You've got something that's decomposing in that soil. So it's making compost. That mushroom is an indicator, that little fungi in there is an indicator that you have moisture and you have organic matter. Mushrooms are not bad. Now, poisonous ones don't eat them, but it is a good indicator of a healthy ecosystem. So penicillin, obviously we've all at some point had some sort of bacterial infection, and we know that penicillin is a healthy medicine. So fungal, anything that is a fungi, it's a eukaryotic decomposer, and I spelled decomposer wrong. Sorry about that. I just caught that. Powdery mildew is going to be one of the bad guys. Yes, it's still a fungus, but powdery mildew is going to cause a lot of systemic issues. It's not waiting for the plant to die yet. Yeah.
What is the slime mold considered? Is that like?
It is. Yeah, mold. Yeah, like the dog vomit. Yep. Yeah, those are all going to be fungi, and if they're growing on the soil or on the mulch, leave it alone. I mean, it looks terrible, but leave it alone. It's doing. Yeah, yeah. The first time I saw the dog vomit, I was like, "What is that?"
Yeah.
I had never seen it. I mean, it very well could be growing on our property down in the trees, but yeah. Rust, black spot, and blight. Those are going to be some of the other diseases that you need to be aware of. And those are all fungal infections. Yeah.
Scab. It's a disease. It's a bacterial disease that grows on the eyes of potatoes and then it tears it apart. It makes them all mushy.
Well, so if it's in an isolated plant, you need to remove that plant. If it's a bacterial infection,
That's AIDS. Micro.
yeah, yeah. If it's bacterial, your best bet is, we'll talk about that because I've got some remedies in here for more natural treatment of that. Viruses, the rose mosaic virus, the tobacco ring virus, barley yellow, these are just a fraction. Viruses are really hard to diagnose and they're really hard to treat. So some of the nutrition, the pictures that I had you guys do when you played plant doctor, you only had a picture to go off of. You didn't actually have the plant to look at. So the questions, when you see a plant that is in trouble, 3 questions you have to ask. Is it nutrient driven? Is it a pest? Or is it bacterial or fungal? Is it a disease? Okay. And that's where you start to find, even when I ask the people that have master's degrees in this, they don't know. If it is viral, it typically can be diagnosed using an electron scanning microscope. And that gets real expensive real quick. Yep. They do make tabletop ones now that are about $1 million. The very first one I ever saw when we were at A&M, my senior year, we got the very first one, and they had to like take part of the building apart and load it into the building because it was so big. It was like the old IBM mainframes that couldn't even run a fraction of what we have on this. They had to build the building around it. My dad telling some of those stories and having to use cranes and take out the wall and move the components in. Yeah, we do have really bad squash bugs out there. So if you bring the garlic and the serrano peppers, I'll bring the blender next week. After we make the smoked salsa. This is Stevie's question up here. We'll make the smoked salsa first and then we'll make bug spray. I'm game.
When you eat that squash bugs, I just been soaking that.
Uh-huh.
And
So
it's hard to.
it is. Well, especially if it rains and it dries. I did give you guys 2 links for pathogens. Ohio State University, very well known for their plant biology, agriculture. So preventing disease in plants. This is hopefully will address your question, Richard. Select varieties that are resistant. If you have positively identified a virus or a bacterium in your area, 2 things you can do. Change the variety of plant, find one that is resistant to that. Steve, they're going down the using pepper spray. I love it. Hey, find out what we need as a carrier for that, if we need a carrier, or if it's just water. So part of the research that AgriLife does is they will find varieties that are susceptible to a disease, like you've heard Stevie talk about the grapevines that she is propagating. They are Pierce's disease resistant because we have heavy clay soils here that can retain a lot of water. Pierce's disease is one of those that can wipe out an entire vineyard. Do we need to strain it first? We'll see. She'll answer it in a minute. Rotate your crops every year. I've always been told, and she'll double check. Okay. I've always been told that where I have potatoes this year, do not plant potatoes there next year. Or if you're going to do a fall crop, don't plant them in the same place. The potato blight that caused all of the famine that happened in Ireland, yeah, it was because that was the only crop they grew, and they grew it year after year. And once year after year, and the disease was still in the soil. If you rotate your crops, or the research now, find a crop that will break that disease or that parasite, because we do that with livestock all the time. If you can break that cycle, then you've now prevented it. Okay. If you find one plant that's diseased and you can remove it and none of the other plants, and you want to sanitize your hands or any cutting utensils, one of the things that when we're pruning, if you come across a plant that's diseased, you really truly, anytime you move from plant to plant, you need to take alcohol or vinegar and you need to wipe off your shears, especially if you're in a greenhouse situation, because the disadvantage of being in a greenhouse is that you are growing everything in a much more condensed area. And by the time you realize that disease is present in a controlled environment, the plants are so close, you may have just wiped out your entire crop. So it's a really good idea to, if you have like the little Fiskar cutters, little tiny blade, if you have a way of like dipping it into alcohol or peroxide or some sort of solution that will kill it. Alcohol is great. Alcohol will also kill some pests. Peroxide works really well too. 3%, just regular peroxide like you get. You can even dilute it and put it in a spray bottle and spray them and go. So sanitize your equipment, sterilize your seed starting media. Most of what we buy, the seed starting media that we purchase off Amazon, is usually through Miracle Grow and it's already sterilized. I know this is not politically correct, but there's a reason why we have genetically modified variants of some plants, because they are resistant to certain diseases. So keep that in mind. You know, it's everybody wants the heirloom varieties, but they can be very susceptible to certain pests. Okay, bugs. Always try to identify the culprit and the stage of the life cycle. If you can't, I would suggest getting an app on your phone, and I have let me see, I think it's called Seek. So I have the iNaturalist app that the Master Gardeners developed. And I have this, nope. I have a farming game on my phone that I just opened. I have Seek, which is the kind of the freebie version of iNaturalist. And it wants to know your location because it can better identify what might be in this area. It's just a good tool to have. If you have an iPhone, you can take a picture with, I think it's with the newer iPhones or the newer iOS operating system. You can take a picture and then you can actually open the picture on your iPhone and I think you swipe up. I don't have an iPhone, but my mom does this all the time. Again, she's a master naturalist, so she's always trying to identify stuff, and she accidentally found it. She's 85 years old and knows how to use her iPhone better than I know how to use my Android. She scrolls up and it gives her options and it says, identify this. So she can click on it and it acts just like the Google Lens on here. I don't think it's very accurate because she pulled something up and identified it and it was not even close. But it made for an entertaining dinner conversation. One of the things that we did at the Wiley campus is we went on Amazon and we purchased 100,000 ladybugs. We purchased 3 packages of ladybugs. Very, very careful when you release those. Release them at night or release them very early in the morning before the sun comes up and they won't leave your property. If you do it in the middle of the day, it's too hot and they're going to go seek shade. And typically you're going to lose most of them. They're just going to go away. Yeah.
Is there a natural way to attract ladybugs that's very specifically for ladybugs?
If you have a lot of aphids on your property, they're going to find it naturally. We had aphids last year. We had an infestation at the Wiley campus and we turned the ladybugs loose and within 3 or 4 days they were gone. The squash borer beetles, we've had a consistent problem at Wiley with those. Even they decimated our pumpkin crop last year. And we tried a couple of different varieties of pumpkins and they were non-discriminatory. They just took them all out. We managed to get a harvest, but in some cases, the harvests were very small and not nearly the numbers we thought we should get. You can do BT. So what you can do with the vine borer, you can inject the plant. There is a way to inject the stem for the vine borer beetles, but you have to do it pretty often. You can use soap, Dawn dishwashing soap mixed up, and it doesn't take a lot of it. We use it quite often and I had my propane guy tell me this. One of the best ways, because every propane tank they service in the spring will have a wasp nest underneath. So the very first thing they do is they have a water bottle like this with a little tiny hole in it. They lift that lid and they spray the wasps, knocks them down, kills them. It breaks up the protein coat and they can't fly and they die. It works. You can do companion planting. I will say we did a 8-ounce pack of marigolds out at the farm just for grins. We didn't have anything else to plant there. We planted an entire section of marigolds, and we don't have any bugs in that area. If I were going to do it next year, I would probably do, instead of, we did like single plants this year, and I don't think they're dense enough. I think next spring we'll do a row of tomatoes, we'll do a row of marigolds, we'll do a row of potatoes or whatever, and then we'll do a row of marigolds. Marigolds are, the seeds are cheap. You don't have to, I mean, that 8-ounce bag covered almost an eighth of an acre. Smells great when I mow them because I just had to mow some of them down. Smells really good. You can use lemongrass, citronella, you can use garlic, marigolds, you can use lavender. There are some plants that are a high value cash crop, like lavender. If you can do alternating rows with lavender, it's a good repellent for some pests. Floating row covers. If you can get your floating row covers in and you don't capture any bugs, where's my mouse? There it is. If you can get your floating row covers in and completely sealed, and you have your water, your soaker hoses underneath, it will do a really good job at keeping bugs out that are not already present. If they're already present on the plant when you cover it up, you've now created a great environment for them.
What do you use to seal those, like piece of wood?
Dirt. I just take dirt and I put it over the edge. Yeah. Yeah. You can also use those staples that you use for landscape fabric. I've had friends of ours that have taken like a 1x2 and they have the hoops, the wire coated hoops. And they basically build out of 1x2s or 2x4s, they build a frame and it can go the entire bed. They lift it up to harvest, do what they need to do, and then they bring it back down and they just have that floating row cover stapled to it. Plants that need full sun don't do well under a floating row cover because it's about an 80% block on direct sunlight. Yep. Know the life cycle. If you know that the life cycle of that pest is coming to an end and you can wait 2 more weeks to plant, it may be worth your time to wait. Chickens. When I had my garden much closer to the barn and my chickens free ranged, once I got my plants established, because I would have to fence it out because they would follow me behind me and pick all the seeds out of the ground. Trying to grow corn and there's no corn seeds in the ground. Once everything was big enough and established, the chickens would come in and I didn't deal. I got a ton of zucchini that year. I didn't have to deal with the squash bugs and the vine borer beetles. Chickens love them. But you have to have your chickens in proximity and you have to manage them because until the plants are about this tall, you have to keep them out of it. Either use a chicken tractor, you can use a movable coop. I don't have any grasshoppers around my house. I never have grasshoppers around my house because I have chickens and they will fight over a grasshopper. My numbers are down. I've had as many as 100. I'm down to probably 25 now. We've had a lot of attrition to predators this year. Yeah, we raised out 50 in October. I bought 100 pullets, basically sold 50 of them and kept 50. And I mean, as soon as we turned them out, I think I had maybe 10 of those original 50. So we either had a fox or we had a bobcat because we found the tracks. We've expanded the area where my livestock guardian dog can go, and we haven't lost any more to predators. I did lose one to old age the other day, but she's probably 8 years old. Huh?
30-06.
Yeah, the problem is it's aimed right towards the road, and it can't shoot across the road. That's a problem. Oh, right. So spinosad, we had, as you know, if you did anything with the succulents next door, you know that we had like a major infestation of fungus gnats and tried the neem oil and it was a losing battle. I would spray, it would knock them down. 2 days later, back again. And you have to spray every 24 hours and you read the label on neem oil. You have to make up a fresh batch every 2 days. It does not keep in the bottle. So I went to my favorite nurseryman, Steve, at Steve's Nursery, and I said, help, what do I do? And he said, you need to use spinosad. Spinosad is organic, it is OMRI certified, and it also will take out spider mites because I brought in a fiddly fig from Home Depot and I bought a big one. I was like, I'm going to be brave. I know these are temperamental plants, but I'm going to get one. Came in with spider mites and I started noticing the very fine spider web. Took 2 spray of spinosad and neem oil, got rid of the problem. Now I haven't sprayed in like a month. I need to go back and spray again. But the mosquito dunk bits, if you can stop them at the larval stage, which the mosquito dunk bits, you can't just put them in the potting soil and water on top. If I found the best 3-prong effect for fungus gnats, take the mosquito bits, let them sit in warm to slightly hot water for 30 minutes, let all that seep into the water, and then water with that. So my house plants, which we had this massive infestation of fungal gnats, that the spinosad and the neem oil, it's finally to the point where I might have 20 a week now instead of thousands. And I don't like them. Diatomaceous earth works on, so it is a chemical compound because it comes from diatoms, but it's a mechanical pest control. If you look at a diatom under an electron microscope, it has really sharp edges. And literally what it does when it comes into contact with an insect is it makes these little micro tears, like microblading, right, on your eyebrows. Guys, y'all probably don't know what that is, but it makes these little micro tears. And what happens is the insect literally like loses all of its internal fluid. It desiccates it. It just dries it out. So DE is great, but when it gets wet, it loses all the sharp edges. So you have to, if you put it out on your plants and it doesn't rain and you're not top watering, DE is great. If you come in or you get a heavy rain, you're going to have to reapply DE. Trap cropping. This is, you take a crop that you know these bugs love and you could care less about it, and you take like a 20 by 20 area and that's all you plant there. You want to draw the bugs into your trap crop and get it away from your beneficial plants. So to me, it sounds like more work. I think spraying would be easier. So having an integrated pest management plan. This is one of the things that going into this, you should have at least a notion of what you want to do. And be prepared to pivot. Anytime you're dealing with agriculture, you've heard me say we're the most optimistic people on the planet because we keep doing things year after year, even after having a rough year. Have a toolbox or a binder with notes that you've taken, things that have worked, things that have not worked. Don't make the same repeated mistake. A healthy plant, a very healthy plant, is your best first step towards preventing damage from pests. Have an app on your phone because let's face it, our phones go everywhere with us, right? Don't expect you to take a notebook out there. Take a picture of it, try to get an idea of what that bug or that disease is. Organic doesn't mean you can't use chemicals. Organic means that there are certain chemicals that when they break down, they leave no residue. Kale and clay is one that once you have fruit that sets, like tomatoes or potatoes, well, potatoes are underground, tomatoes, some melons, what was that? Strawberries, yeah. So kale and clay, if you can figure out a way to mix it into water and get it to spray, where you coat the plant and you coat the fruit, they don't get sunburned. Some fruit will get sunburned or sun damaged, and the leaves won't dry out as fast because it makes this like gray coating on the plant. It doesn't look very appetizing, but it washes right off. The issue is if you can get it to work in a sprayer, because a hand pump up sprayer, it'll clog it every time. kaolin clay. It's Kaolin. Kaolin clay. Yeah. It has to be agitated continuously for it to really function through your sprayer. And with all hand pump up sprayers, even if you shake it a lot, if you get it a little too concentrated, it's going to clog your sprayer. So I hear it works. We've struggled with getting it to work on our hand sprayers. So.
Well, if you use, you make like protein shakes, this little circle walnuts.
Yeah.
Put a bunch of them in there, and then you shake it.
Yeah.
That would toss it around.
It might. The particle size, you may need a bigger wand or a thicker tube, because what happens is it gets gummed up in there. It's like when you're drinking a really cold shake and it all gets jammed up in the straw and you can't get it to move. It does sound good. That's basically what happens with the kaolin clay. So I think you probably need a bigger diameter, and just have to keep it moving. So, Dawn dishwashing soap, again, or insecticidal soaps are typically going to be a good first response that's fairly cheap. You can get a 2-gallon hand pump up sprayer and you can put Dawn dishwashing soap in there. You can actually mix it with some of the other compounds that they've talked about in here. So Charlie was saying cayenne pepper, Dawn dish detergent, water, boil the cayenne pepper, sit for 24 hours, then mix with water and detergent. Okay. The vegetables may have a tangy taste, but still be good. Your bugs won't like the taste. Yeah. So yeah, so he found the recipe for doing the cayenne pepper. I'm willing to try all different things. Sometimes if you're not going to be certified organic, sometimes as much as we do that's organic at our farm, I've never in my life thought, oh, let me be certified organic and I can double the price of my produce or my beef. I'm not going to do that. One, try to find beef cattle feed in quantity that is certified organic, USDA organic. You can't. I have neighbors who spray and I'm only on 20 acres. So we get army worms that come through and they go hit it with a variety of pesticides. I know for a fact these people don't know the rules of spraying and fence lines and wind speed. So yeah. And to be honest with you, my peaches are organic this year and most of them have ant embryos and ant larvae inside of them, and I can't think of anything that's more disgusting than biting into a peach and there's bugs in there. Y'all may feel differently and that's totally fine. I just don't like to eat bugs. Omri, I did give you all the link for Omri. This is basically every chemical. Let's see if it'll actually give it to me. This is basically every chemical out there that Omri listed products. You can find a product and you can go look for it. You can do search, you can get listed. Basically, there's 10,000 compounds out there that are now organically certified. Hopefully I spelled that right. So spinosad or spinosad, however you're going to say it, it's listed. It's allowed with certain restrictions. Okay. And you can go through and find out everything that they've looked at and evaluated that has spinosad or spinosad in it, spinosad. So if it has the Canadian maple leaf, it's in Canada. It's been evaluated for Canada. If it has the American flag, it's been evaluated for the US. Okay, it's a great resource to know and to have access to. hate this little drop down. It always gets in my way. Okay. Get creative. You know, if you have a high tunnel or greenhouse and you can create a plan for putting screens up and using even bug zappers, or some pests are attracted to CO2. And obviously in some greenhouse operations, they're pumping in CO2 when there are no people in there to get maximum production. They have to be aware that they may have a pest load that they have to deal with. Having preventative measures outside of the greenhouse before you ever get in. So a lot of commercial greenhouses and research greenhouses, you'll notice they have a vestibule on them now. They actually have a 2-door system to go in. You go into the vestibule, you close the first door, you do a quick survey, no pests came in with you, then you can enter the greenhouse. In certain greenhouse growing operations, you have to be fully suited in like a hazmat type suit, just because they don't want contaminants in there. That's a little excessive to me. I mean, they're plants, and if they're growing in dirt, well, you've already got microbiology happening in there. But get creative. Some pests, one thing we didn't talk about is wildlife. What do you do? What do you do if you have deer that get into your garden? It's not hunting season. What do you do about the deer?
Motion sensor sprinklers.
Yeah.
Put in to keep the cat out of my big litter box.
Yep. Your giant raised bed turns into a cat litter box. Yep. Yeah. You can use the Mylar streamers for like certain aerial. Like I have chickens. Hawks love chickens. You can use the Mylar tape that blows in the wind, and that kind of spooks them. It acts as, I'm telling you, a livestock guardian dog was the best investment I ever made. Ducks, if you want to put up with their smell, ducks are another good preventative. Other bird species that only eat insects, if you can attract certain songbirds to your property by feeding them, those songbirds will take out some of those pests. Yes, for flying insects, bats are great. For mosquitoes, put a bat house up. Hands down, always put a bat house up. Some species of bats can also act as pollinators. If you can attract pollinators, butterflies, hummingbirds, songbirds to your property, you will find that your balance with the pests that you have, you're now creating diversity in your garden, and it's always going to be beneficial. So, last thing you can do is, if you're not going to be pure organic and you want to be able to apply certain controlled substances, you can go ahead and get your independent applicator's license. There are a lot of people that have their independent applicator's license that are organic farmers. There are some compounds that you still have to have a license to purchase. As an independent commercial applicator, I cannot apply pesticides and charge you money. I did have mine. I let it expire because we moved out of state. New York State doesn't even allow you to get an IPM license. You couldn't pay me to apply pesticide, but you could reimburse me for the cost of the herbicide. And then because I'm licensed, I can come to your house and I can mix it up in your 3,000 gallon sprayer, and I can just supervise you applying it. And that's it. Friends do that all the time, like partner farmers do that all the time. If I'm going to be doing this as a line of work, then I have to get my commercial applicator's license, which is a much harder thing to do.
Like give you like a 10% donation.
No, but we were known to donate a few bales of hay to someone who had their license that I needed him to come mix up, because we had the big sprayer before I got my license. And so he would come mix it up for it. He would buy it. We would reimburse him for the cost of it in cash. We wouldn't have a money trail for that. Because you're talking $300 for a gallon of pesticide that will, last you for 2 or 3 years, but it's still expensive. You know, I'm a big fan of the barter type thing where, hey, you do this for me and I'll, yeah. Yeah. Don't do anything on like digital. People ask me, well, why don't you take Venmo or Cash App or Zelle? It's because I don't want a record that I've just sold you $300 worth of beef. I'd rather do a check or cash. It's under $600 on the check, I'm good. If it's more than 600, I'm like, I have to report that. I do report all of my income. I just don't want them I don't want them snooping on my digital footprint. So, and I also don't want to have a digital connection to my finances that if it gets hacked, I'm toast. So there's an online class you can do now. It is $100. You can do it through AgriLife. These are the steps that you would do. I think I put the link on there. Maybe not. I thought I did. Apparently I did not. Well, I had the class. So you can just search under Texas A&M AgriLife, independent applicator pesticide license class. I think it's $100 to take the class. If we get enough students in the program that wanted to do it, Brad Voss would come do it. They do have to charge, but I think he could do it for like $40, maybe $20 and pizza. Brad's pretty good at that, but AgriLife has to see some sort of income because it's a licensing training. And then you would have to pay to go take the test, and you have to go to another location. Used to be the AgriLife agent could teach the class and you took the test that day and you went home with your license. That's how I did mine up in Fannin County. So yeah, not the longest PowerPoint, but a lot of information. So if you guys have been poking around the class and you saw that there were notes that we were going to have y'all write, I just gave them to y'all. We don't have time for y'all to do this. This was a really good set of notes that was pulled by Michaela's class. It just gives you a little bit more information. It defines some of the, like knowing how much amendment to add. I'm from Louisiana. I don't cook with a recipe. You see that meme and it's like, I wait for my ancestors to tell me I've seasoned it enough. Stevie and I laughed about that. It's the same way with amendments. I do it by feel. I'll get off the tractor and go feel the soil and say, okay, how much more compost do I need? If the ground is so hard and I can't get the native soil to till, I'll just layer it with compost, because you know what? You can plant plants directly in compost because we're doing it right out here. Okay. Soil layers. I know you guys y'all are supposed to do a 3D model of this, and I said a 2D would be just fine. Literally, you're going to sketch here this. What I want you guys to understand is that we have varying soils here in Texas. And depending on the soil, it depends on how deep it's going to go. So Stevie brought up a good point in the chat I do want to share with you guys. So genetically modified organisms is not necessarily where they've gone in and done gene splicing. GMO is kind of an umbrella term that, yes, we can do the CRISPR technology. We can bring in components of other organisms' DNA and add it to that plant and make it resistant to certain diseases, or make it glow in the dark if you want, because jellyfish. But genetically modification is as ancient as, 10,000 years ago, we realized, oh, there's this thing that looks something like maize or sorghum. And then there's this other grass over here that they crossbred, and we got this ear of corn that tastes good, because sorghum and maize originally were not sweet like modern sweet corn. Modern wheat is a completely human crossbred development from thousands of years ago. We didn't have the technology we have. So you can look at wheat and say, well, it was genetically modified because it was selectively bred to have a higher nutritional value and to taste better. Okay, that is a genetic modification. We just took the idea of cross-pollination and we came up with modern wheat. We do it in cattle all the time. We cross Brahma cattle, which are very thick skinned. They handle the heat. They're almost, I mean, they're notorious because of that thick skin to not be bothered by insects. So we take that Brahma cow and we cross them on Hereford cattle or Angus cattle, and we now have like the ideal Texas cow that can handle heat and they're not as susceptible to insects and parasites. We figured that out a couple of 100 years ago. And now we have breeds in Texas like Brangus and Santa Gertrudis that all have a healthy dose of Brahma in them. So on your soil profiles, you understand there's O, A, B, C, and then there's bedrock. And if you actually do a Google search, you're going to see a layer E, which I wasn't seeing in any of her notes. But that's an alluviated soil. And basically, it's leached of clay and mineral. So it's usually going to be a sandy loam. If you go to Hunt County, we have a sandy loam topsoil, and it doesn't hold a lot of organic material. I mean, it feels great on your hands, but you do need to amend it to get that organic matter because it is so sandy where we are. So it has pretty much been alluviated. I still have yet to find out how deep our bedrock goes, if we even have a bedrock. The two top layers, the humus or humus, and your topsoil, those are the two that you need to protect at all costs. Humus or humate is going to be that organic layer. So she's saying her son Eli was listening to the Zoom and is just really excited about bats. He loves bats. He's going to be a biologist. I just know it. So your topsoil, your subsoil, and then you're going to get down to the parent material. And notice that I only had 2 colors of marker. So I did a little bit of color coding there for y'all. Again, protect your topsoil and any of that organic. You can have a really thick organic layer in a forest. We're not talking rainforest that is notably has poor soil, but any like old growth hardwood forest, you go in and you start digging down, you're going to find a really thick layer of organic matter. It's all that leaf litter and all the branches that have fallen and decomposed. The topsoil may be fairly thin in a forest because the humate has been developing, and you're not getting a mix of the subsoil and the humate. When we farm, a lot of times we're going down in the very top part of that subsoil and bringing it up and incorporating amendments into that. So we're speeding up the process. It's going to happen in nature. We're just accelerating that. So that's where you have to decide, is it better to till or not till? And again, the question is always going to come back to what kind of soil do you have and what works best for your situation. It's never always going to be absolutely this is the best way to do it. I mean, sustainable agriculture means that you're not destroying the environment around you. You're creating a micro habitat for the time that you're growing those fruits and vegetables, where you can draw in some of the beneficial organisms like songbirds and bats. Yes, I said bats, Eli. You're bringing those in. How are you making it sustainable? How are you making it appealing so that they stay? We get a lot of the bluebirds in our area. We get a lot of the purple martins. I mean, they come in and they'll take out a lot of the flying insects. But hands down, figure out what's already available in your ecosystem. And if you can tap into that, it doesn't cost you anything. It's just education and being aware. Questions? I know I covered a lot of deep information and I lectured much longer than I usually like to.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I got a bag of buffalo grass seeds And the area that I want to plant it has some weeds, but for the most part, it's, got nothing. And it's been getting hit by the sun
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yeah.
How do I go about preparing the ground and planting the seed in such a way so it has the best chance of germinating?
What kind of soil do you have? Is it the black clay?
No, it's actually runoff because there wasn't anything, and it's kind of at the bottom of the slope.
Okay. So is it fairly easy to just take you know what a straight rake is?
Yeah.
With the metal rakes,
Yeah.
and it's like a 90-degree. Take a straight rake. I would pull out any weeds, what few pieces might be there. Take your straight rake and just scarify it. Put the seed down and then turn the rake over to the flat side and just try to cover it.
So just a very thin layer.
Yeah. Yep. It doesn't take a lot, but you're going to have to water it heavily until it gets established, and it'll probably take 6 weeks.
Once a day?
As hot as it's been, yes, but you don't want to water it so that it washes down that slope. If you're trying to get it established on that slope, you're going to have to water it once a day or maybe twice a day even. But you've got to get that seed wet enough that it'll germinate. The other option you can do is you could germinate it in a controlled environment like we have over here. And you could basically create sprigs. My son has tried it both ways. I gave him the rest of that seed from that bag because I personally bought that, not the college. And he has buffalo grass on his 20 acres that he's been trying to recapture. It was the property that was wall to wall Eastern red cedars. And he really wants all Blackland Prairie native grasses to graze on that property. My parents' back pasture is solid buffalo grass, and he took a sprigger out and he took some sprigs, and that has done really well. So if you can create an environment with a mix of potting soil and native soil, the trays we did in here for the demo, we didn't use any native soil. If you can do like a 50-50 mix of your native soil and potting soil and start them in trays, and then just get them nice and tall. And if you wanted to bring some of the soil on Tuesday and start it in the lab, or I guess Thursday this week, if you're going to be here, we can take 5 minutes and take your native soil and mix it with potting mix and start it in here. And then take the other part of the seed and do direct sow on the ground and see what works better. So, it's trial and error. It's one of those things that if you had started it probably 6 weeks ago, I would have said just do direct sow on the soil and water it. Of course, we had a ton of rain. But yeah, plugging. Will he really preferred the plugging method because the roots are well established, and he went down about 6 inches. So.
What do you do with the black clay? I couldn't get a shovel through it. I could use dynamite. I don't think it would.
No, well, and see, that's where you get into that conundrum of timing of the year, because if you had done it when we'd had all the rain, you might have been able to get the sprigs in. Most of the sprigging companies will tell you, hey, it's too dry right now. We can't get any penetration of the soil. It's a waste of money. Typically they sprig in late April, early May for the summer grasses. So yeah, it may be a timing issue too. So at the Wiley campus, we had, after they did the construction and finished it, we literally have 0 humus and topsoil. Where the black clay is, unless when you walk on it, it feels like you're walking on grass growing in concrete. There's nearly no topsoil and no humate. Every time they go through and mow, though, they go mow those grasses and leave that cut grass on there. They've now started to build that up. The more they do that, the faster we'll rebuild that topsoil. But it can take a decade or longer after a construction site to rebuild it. If you can get sod, sod is, especially Bermuda grass, it's so densely packed. When you plant it and you get it established, you now have you've artificially created that very thin layer. But on this black clay, it's very thin.
trees, patio,
Mhm.
so the guy puts a lot of soil on the flower bed area,
Right.
but when I touch it, it's light brown. So,
Does it feel like sand?
it feels like sand.
So if you want to know what's in there, there's a really, really cheap test. You take like a pickle jar, take a glass jar. Just this is like guerrilla soil sampling. Try to go down about 6 inches, get just a thin column of soil. If you have to take a shovel and then just take that little middle finger out of the soil, you want to clear the rest off and then pour that into the jar and then fill it with water. Leave a little bit of airspace because what you're going to do is put the lid on tightly and shake it and then let it sit. Sand is immediately going to settle to the bottom. And if you have a lot of organic matter, it typically is going to float. So black clay, if you let it sit for 24 hours, it will settle. But any kind of clay, the particles are so small, you have to give it time for it to settle. So, but sand, I mean, you'll see it. It'll be tan.
Yeah.
And he may have added sand. That's one of the worst things you can do in these soils.
No, I was not there when I come home. Like this was all sand.
Yes. It sounds like it's all sand. You
What can I do if like it's more of the sand? Can I add more? Because I think I saw in Walmart they have the topsoil that
mhm. Look carefully at that topsoil bag. I would actually prefer that you just add really good compost. Yep. Yeah, it sounds like to me like they already added soil and sand to it. One of the things that they suggest around here is expanded shale. But expanded shale it's not as dense as sand, so it doesn't settle as much. But if you get the recipe wrong and you get too much expanded shale, it can make like a concrete type compaction. So break any of that up, add compost. And I would say, go buy a few bags of compost if you live in a city that works with Texas Pure, and you can actually go on the Texas Pure website. If you live in a city that partners with them, you should be able just to go pick up bags from one of their locations. The city of Plano started it years ago. And I think Frisco is one of their partner cities. So
I just go on the Frisco website and look for
Google Texas Pure, Pure, Texas Pure. They do potting mix, they do compost, they do mulches, everything that y'all were working with on Thursday night. We were refilling the bed that came from Texas Pure. Yeah.
and I can get compost from there.
Mm-hmm. We usually get a 20-yard dump load at a time here, and you can see we have excess. We have more than we really needed to do what we need to do.
That's from the site,
Melissa, Anna, I think it's in Melissa or Anna. Their actual composting facility, I think, is in Melissa. But
I think they operate off of,
yes, they'll have, like in Plano, I think you can go. So is Eli going to volunteer to build bat houses for all of us? Eli is 12, right? Stevie? Or 13? So he just did the nature camp with us for 2 weeks. Yeah, he's 12. He just did the nature camp with us. We had an absolute blast with him. We had the herpetologist from the Blackline Prairie master naturalist and the Herb Museum. He brought a snake, a turtle, and a lizard from Australia. We did insect identification, and Eli is light years ahead of me, even after having a college entomology class. He can tell you pill bugs. He can tell you the difference between the male and the female and if she's getting ready to lay eggs. He is, I mean, he thought he wanted to be an entomologist, but I think he needs to be a biologist. So we love you, Eli. I know you can hear me. He's being bashful. Of course he is. I've embarrassed him. He's got the cutest dimples too. Yeah, other questions? Yes. You said there were raised beds or are they flower beds? Yeah, I would mix the compost in. At least the top like 3 or 4 inches, you want to mix the compost in. It's a good question. Did y'all check the flower beds, any of the plant beds tonight? No? I don't have anything else tonight. Y'all have a test though, exam 1.
It opens on Sunday.
No, I went ahead and moved it to open. I think I opened it last night, but it's not due until July 7th.
Okay.
So you have this week and next week to get ready for it.
It said it wasn't gonna open till Sunday, but that online.
I think I had it set for the 30th. It is online. Did you get my email? I added you to the 24-21 class in Canvas. So when you go into Canvas,
I haven't checked Canvas yet, but
you can get in though now, right?
I think so.
Okay. If for some reason you cannot, let me know. And for next week, if I can't, I don't know if I can pull a paper copy of the exam. If you'd rather take a paper copy, just let me know. I'll figure out a way to make that happen. But it's an open book. You have 2 hours. Take all your notes. I'm not using a lockdown browser because, again, I've done this for 40 years and I still don't remember everything. I don't expect you to have everything stuck in your head, but I need you to know where to find the information. Yeah.
I've never understood why the professors do that, and it's like, in 20 years, I'm gonna put my phone down, whatever.
What really changed my mind, because I spent 26 years teaching to a standardized test. No. Spent 26 years teaching to a standardized science test where students had to remember the most inane information that they would never use again in their life. And it just really rubbed me the wrong way after being in public education for that long. Like, I understand if I need to test your math skills, that it's not open book. I do need to know if it's a chemistry test or if it's an anatomy test, it shouldn't be open book. We're not teaching, anatomy and physiology so you can go be a nursing student. You're taking this class because you have a genuine interest, and you already have, all of y'all have come with some experience of some kind growing stuff. So all we're doing now is taking you to the next level and saying, hey, even the folks with the doctorate, PhD, master's degrees in this, we don't always know the answers. We have to look it up. So it makes total sense to me for you to use your resources.
What is the lockdown browser?
Lockdown browser, and we're actually, Colin's getting rid of it. HonorLock was one of them that we used. You would go into the test and you couldn't get out of that browser where the test was to look up answers. Well, you could, and I've had high school students that were taking dual credit that would come into my class that, hey, I need to take my exam. Can I sit here and take it? And I would just sit back and watch. I wouldn't judge. I wouldn't say anything because it's like, hey, if the colleges are going to use a lockdown browser and they don't know that they're doing this under the table, or they have a laptop right here, right, sitting right in front of a computer screen with a keyboard right here, and they can't see, if you tilt this back ever so slightly, they can't see that your arms are moving from one keyboard to the next. It's like, all we've done is created a generation of young people that their sole goal in life is to figure out how well they can actually cheat. I'm like, So I'm taking that option away from our students. I want you to be able to know where to find. One, I think it creates much more engaged students. And two, knowing where these resources are and not like hitting the anxiety panic button that, oh my God, I've got a test and I've got to study for it. Yeah, you want to study for it because you've only got 2 hours. We've covered a lot of information in 4 units. So I think it's 20 questions, 5 points each. It's 100 points. So I pulled all the essay questions off because I won't have time to grade the short answer part of it. There are a couple of questions that there are multiple answers. So if I have to go back and if you get 2 of the 3 of them and it gives you no credit in Canvas, don't take that final grade because I'll go back and evaluate it. Yeah. And I'm at this point right now completely caught up on grading, so y'all should be good. And so far we're doing great. Yeah, I'm not worried about it. So
Our beans that we did on Thursday, the 1 hour and the 48 hours. Or whatever,
did you take them home and look at them, or did you put them in there?
I took them home, and this morning they went from this to like this. The 1 hour one grew.
Yeah.
The other one is just little notes.
So this afternoon I went in because, we drained that beaker that had the 48-hour one soaked. And I went in this afternoon and I was like, oh, I should probably get rid of those before they grow mold. And then I started looking really closely and they'd all sprouted in the beaker with no water. So I planted them tonight and I watered them. We'll see. They just have like a little tiny root on there. I don't know. We'll see.
Do we bring those pots back on Thursday then, or?
If you want to just take a picture and bring it. Or if they're too big and too cumbersome, or you're going to break them, put them in the car. We do want to start recording what's happening with those. And if you're seeing a noticeable difference between the ones that were soaked 48 hours versus the 1 hour, put a ruler behind it and take a picture of it because that's your data.
Yeah, just this morning I took a picture
Mhm.
and it was about like that, but when I left to come here, it was like that. And I guess that's just beans, Jack and beanstalk thing.
Yeah. Well, once they get going and they've got adequate moisture and nutrition, they take off. I used to have my AP biology students grow them, and we would always see who could keep theirs alive the longest. Once they got past we've tested all these different variables, and then it was a contest to see who's could get the tallest and grow the longest. And we would have some that within a matter of 2 weeks would be like 3 or 4 feet long.
So the pinto beans, they grow like in a pod and you break it open and get the beans out. I've never seen.
You mean the pinto that we have in here? Yeah, no, they all grow in pods, just like
I've never seen like a real pinto bean. I've seen them in the bags.
Oh yeah. You buy a ham hock and you buy a bag of beans. Yeah. Yeah. So purple Halt peas, cream peas, lady cream peas, those all fall into a category called cowpeas because they basically are they are super cheap to buy and they grow in the heat of summer. And once you harvest all the pea pods, you can graze your cattle on them. Or you don't even have to harvest the peas, you just graze your cattle on them. They love it. So you can bale soybean. You can bale all the bean plant, adequately dry it, bale it, and you can feed it to livestock or mow it and put it back on your property, but it's high in nitrogen. Peas are, so we talked about soybeans. If you need to add nitrogen to your soil, you can use soybean meal or you can use cottonseed meal. Super high in protein when it's been processed correctly, like borderline 50% nitrogen. And it's an organic. You can use it as an organic soil amendment. It doesn't take a lot. So especially cottonseed meal. It's because of that high nitrogen content because they're legumes and they fix nitrogen from the air. That's where that protein comes from. And that's why soybeans make such a good protein alternative for vegans. So yeah, that's why if you're vegetarian, you eat far more beans, again, because of the protein. So, all right, y'all want to go check your plants? You want to go outside and check them? I want you guys to go take a look and if you guys want to make that your last stop as you leave, I want y'all to check the plants that we put the floating row cover over. We watered them really well. We have not watered them since Saturday intentionally because the raised beds were staying soaked. So may need to do a quick water tonight. Oh, Stevie watered on Sunday. Okay, awesome.
Did everybody get your name on this, list for next Tuesday?
Yeah, if you want to, take your stuff with you. If you want to go check in the lab, if you had anything in the lab you needed to check, the code to get in is 145145.
I'll just, for those who aren't here today, I'll just,
I'm gonna take a picture.
okay.
Awesome. You're so organized in how you did this. I love it.
Did somebody sign up for napkins? If not, I'll get those too.
Paper
Paper
goods.
goods?
You did, Lynn's. You did.
Paper plates, cups,
I did my cup.
Yeah, bring
Or
napkins.
just a
You want
roll
to do
of-
napkins, plates and stuff? Okay.
or just a roll of paper
All right.
towels.
Well, that's what I was gonna do, honestly. Yeah, that's
Well-
just good. And when you're getting,
Yeah.
exactly, it matches like that, or
Yeah.
the brown.
For sure. I'm just taking a picture of this so I can share it with Charlie and Stevie. I'm gonna shut this down. All right, guys, I'm gonna shut off the recording. I'll talk to you guys later.
Okay, have a good one.
You too. Take care.
And I got sick.
Yeah.
Was
Stevie.
sick?
Yeah. Bye.